Hey, everybody. We want to welcome you to our Counterpoise podcast. I'm one of your co hosts, Samantha Adams, and I'm joined here with my other two co hosts. Guys, you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Not really. You can do it. No, I'm just playing. Everett Stevenson, one of the co-hosts as well.
Your last and final host. My name is Malik Foster, and we have a very interesting topic for you guys today. We're going to be talking about women, Black women in particular, um, how they've always been working, and we're going to go over indentured servitude, slavery, civil rights, the education of Black women, their evolution of Black women as far as education goes, and some of their activities in the corporate workplace and in the modern day. So, uh,
Yeah, so what? Let me say something. Yeah, so what triggered this discussion today is it was an article, I think, right? It was an article, and it was a woman talking about. I think it was an article. Either way, somebody was talking about women being stay-at-home wives or and things of that nature.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so and there was a lot of she was catching a lot of flack, right? About how women are no longer traditionally stay-at-home moms and yada yada yada. But you know, one of the people came back and they said, Black women never were really stay-at-home moms, were always working, right? And when you really think about that, it really kind of puts a lot of things into perspective as it relates to the place of the Black woman in America, whether you're talking about in relationship or in corporate America, or just in the workforce. And so that was what triggered the conversation. So we were just going to go ahead and dive right in. Before I just dive right in, E, did you want to add anything?
Oh yeah. So to finish up what you were just talking about, it was actually a TikTok that a white lady did, and she kind of posted some imagery of women kind of like staying at home, or just like of like the 50s or 60s type of thing, where it was just showing, women like doing some baking stuff, some domestic things around the house. And she was surprised to see like how many people were just like, oh, we shouldn't romanticize that time and era. Like, there's nothing, great about that. Like, women have to endure so many different things and this, that, and the third, as far as abuse in the house and some other stuff. And so she called flack, and she was just like kind of shocked by it. But then there was a lady, a Black lady, who saw it, and she referenced how like, oh, that stay-at-home wife, like how her life was so easy was due to the fact that, like you mentioned earlier, that that they had indentured servants who were willing to help out with a lot of the domestic things that were going on in the household. So yeah, I think when we first want to jump into the topic, we can go back to discussing it from the roles that women played in the time of slavery, right? Because not only were some women in the fields actually, helping to pick labor or doing what would seemingly be like, I don't want to say sharecropping, but working in the fields, if you will. There were also some women who were working inside of the homes. And those women may be responsible for, maybe helping with some child development, child rearing. I mean, not child rearing, but child development, as well as sometimes they could be helping with cooking and cleaning in the household as well, during the times of slavery.
Well, when you say helping, I think what you mean is they were actually doing it. They were helping other slaves, right? They weren't helping the white woman do it, because the white woman wasn't doing any of it. She was barely raising her kids. You had Black women who would breastfeed white children, and they weren't even pregnant. They were, doing everything other than teaching those children how to read and write, because they didn't know how. Teaching them how to walk, teaching them how to talk, putting clothes on them every day, getting them up, dressed, bathed, however often they bathed. I know that wasn't as often back in the day. That's what they were doing in the house. And like you said, there were definitely women out there in the field. So you had servants inside and you had servants outside. And a lot of that, we did a whole episode on colorism, and a lot of who was closer to the house or inside the house, most of the time, not 100% of the time, but most of the time had to do with the complexion of that Black woman's skin, whether she was darker in complexion or lighter in complexion. She was lighter in complexion, she was closer to the house. Also, too, or if she was considered to be the master's bed wench, also had something to do with that. So I just wanted to go ahead and add to that. And it's sad, right? Because here women were kidnapped, not just women, men were too, but today's focus is the women. So kidnapped from Africa, separated from children, families, the whole bit, and brought over here to work. Those that made it across the slave trade, right? Those that didn't die on the boat or jump off the boat. And then they were sold and auctioned off. I mean, also too, experimented on, we did an episode about that, was that I think about a week or two ago. And from there, still Black women continue to be resilient, right? They still continue to work, do the jobs that they were told to do. And this is not even really to go to the mentality of the Black woman, right? This is more so to just go to what was actually happening, right? And as slavery ended, sharecropping and things like that took place, and Black women continued to be servants, right? Making slave wages, damn near, excuse my language, but they weren't really making very much money. But what's interesting is that, especially in the line of servitude, right? It was taught generationally. So a lot of times if mothers had children, they would teach their daughters to be servants as well, whether they be maids or whatever, so that they always are able to make some form of money, even if it wasn't very much. So,
Yeah, and one of the things that one of the ladies had referenced in her speech, and I do apologize for not necessarily referencing sources for these out of TikTok, but she mentioned how some of the older women would go and work for some of the more affluent homes, whereas the younger ladies would go work for some of the maybe more less affluent households. So if you were, teenage, you'll go help work out with somebody, a family that may be considered to be middle class, if you will. And then if it was an older lady, she may be more so working with more experience and things. She may have been working more with a more higher class, if you will, society. So that was interesting to see, because like you said, it was almost like people were kind of bred into the industry. And also it shows that it was an era where women have always been working, you know what I'm saying? Now, while we can also say that they might not have had the freedoms of being able to acquire homes, or which some of that could be in debate too, but acquire property, if you will, they have been able to find ways of having some levels of financial freedom. And I want to reference that because of one of the ladies that we know in that time to have reached a level of success was Madam C.J. Walker. And for those who may not be familiar with her, she worked with hair care. She was one of the first women to provide, I think it was the hot comb or a straightening comb.
She invented the hot comb.
She invented the hot comb, which allowed us as
first Black
people,
woman millionaire.
Yep, the first Black woman millionaire. So there you go. There's some financial freedom at that time as well. In the 1930s, that had to be, early 1900s, that had to be a significant feat. But one of the things that's interesting about that as well is, as for those who again may not be familiar with what the hot comb does, it helps takes our texture here and allows it to be straightened. So that's how you are able to have hair that might be a little more kinky, and nature look more straight and like other like
Pressed out. I got you.
Yeah, pressed.
Yeah, we get it.
But and we all know who has normally pressed style of hair naturally. So that was one of the things that was interesting because it allowed some people to look at us, and it was maybe one of those conversations that went towards, this is something that kind of allowed us to almost, if you will, fit into society, to blend into society, if you will.
It's
with
like
our
one
hair.
of those inventions that did good but harm at the same time, kind of like the cotton gin, right? When a black man invented the cotton gin, it like made it more productive for the slaves, but they still had to work and use that tool to produce more cotton, because that was like the hot commodity at the time. Everybody wanted, kind of like how gases or other stuff is today. So that's an interesting aspect of it. I just wanted to say that. Go ahead. Steve.
Oh yeah, no, and I just wanted to just reference Mrs. C.J. Walker, Madam C.J. Walker. If I'm not mistaken, did she also have like a school that she had also had at the time, the teaching young ladies?
I feel like she did. If it wasn't a school, it was a hair salon. It was one of the two, maybe both. I can't really remember.
Sort of beauty institute or beauty school.
Yeah, like a beauty school.
For sure. I'm pretty sure she did. But
I also know she created her own hair care products.
And she was also a philanthropist. She was known towards giving up homes. She was able to drive cars. So a lot of the things that we realized that in society, women at that time weren't able to do, she was able to do. And that's something that we kind of realized that, unfortunately for those who are able to achieve it, financial freedom allows, you know what I'm saying? So she was one of the first women that was allowed to drive a car. She was also allowed to, acquire a home, have a business, acquire a business location. So yeah, just wanted to give her respects.
So from there, even though Madam C.J. Walker was more of an exception, a lot of women were doing, again, service type work, whether they were in the home, being housekeepers or cooks. They were also making clothes and doing things like that. That's what many women were doing leading up through into civil rights, right? Black women, rather, leading up to civil rights. And like, even when you watch these movies, like these movies from these different time frames, although some of the plots may be, fictional, a lot of these things have some accuracies to them, right? Like being servants and stuff like that to these white people. And they would get paid. They may live in, modest is probably a nice way of putting it. Accommodations. They would live in pretty much like shacks almost, right? And sometimes they would live on sharecropped land, where maybe their husband had an agreement with somebody who was formerly a master, if it was in the South, to work on the land. And their rental payment was the work. So it was like they would never be able to get out the contract, or maybe they would make money, but the amount of money they would make wouldn't allow for them to get out the contract because it wasn't enough. But then in came the civil rights movement, right? And the purpose of the civil rights movement was to try to get Black people on an equal playing field, right? Whether it be to integrate schools, because you remember they had the whole separate but equal thing, and not just desegregation, but also to get the same thing, because although they had separate, it was supposed to be separate but equal, but everything was unequal, and so it was to also help fight Jim Crow. The purpose of those was to elevate Black people as a whole, but the issue is that as you're trying to elevate Black people as a whole, women as a whole were still being oppressed. So you have a Black woman who's kind of already at the bottom of the totem pole, not kindness. She's at the bottom of the totem pole, no matter how you slice it. She's bottom amongst women. She's bottom against men. And so here she is always working and struggling and trying to help to contribute to the provision for her family, right? And rear up her children and teach them and all of these other things, but she's still not getting adequate pay or accolades or whatever. People are constantly taking credit for the things that she's done. And so, you know, when you're talking about the civil rights movement, it was to move Black people as a whole forward, but Black women were not on the same level as Black men. You know, that's just the truth of the matter, right? And then women's liberation came, right? And the purpose of women's lib was to, you know, uplift the woman as a whole. And so that's why when you look at a lot of the statistics that we often talk about, and you see Black women, they're at the bottom, right? And it's because although the women's liberation movement rode the coattails of the civil rights movement, Black women were still the ones that they still had to continue to work. They still had to, you know, they never had that opportunity. I mean, some do, of course, right? They never really, but they didn't as a whole really have the opportunity to be able to be like, all right, I'm gonna go be a housewife. You know what I mean? So in some instances they absolutely were, but in a lot of instances they weren't.
Yeah, I had some pushback for you, Sam. Like, yeah, you're saying like, you know, it was a whole women's movement, but I feel like just to separate the issue a little bit, like a lot of women, like the women group is divided, right, into different sectors, just like every kind of other group. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of the white women, they wanted certain goals that maybe Black women didn't necessarily want, but they rode the coattails and the issues that Black women had and applied that to themselves, even though they didn't have those issues, like voting, right? That's an issue that they said they didn't have, but they could have owned property. So by that, they could have voted, but Black women not so much, right? So there wasn't like any loopholes or anything for Black women, right?
No, because remember, women as a whole didn't have a right to vote. Women got the right to vote, and then it was like, but Black people still didn't have the right to vote.
Originally, you couldn't vote at all unless you own property, and typically men were the ones that own property, but it wasn't impossible for a woman to own property, is what I'm saying.
But the way she got that
husband,
through
her husband,
through the death of her husband.
Through her husband, women were able to have certain rights, but they had to be married, right, and go through that process. But single women didn't have any of those rights.
But I also want to pivot here and put a little.
Hold on, before you pivot, let me just say this one sentence. You have to remember something, Malik. In those times, being a single woman was frowned upon.
Right.
You were considered an old maid if you were like 15 and not married. Go ahead, E.
Well, yeah. So before we get into the whole, you know, women's rights and everything that spurred after that in the civil rights, I think we have to also take into consideration one other time that was very interesting as well. In particular, it was the era in which the World War II was taking place, and a lot of the men went to work. And this was one of the things that also was a push for the civil rights, because it was like, oh, I'm good enough to fight. And mind you, this isn't even the first time that this took place, because initially in the Civil War, it was okay for Black people to help fight with the North, you know what I'm saying, but still wasn't necessarily to be viewed as men. But then again, in the World War, when World War II occurred, or if I'm not mistaken, at the same time, there was a time in which men went off to war and and their wives would be at home. Well, during this time, some of the soldiers were able to receive like a stipend, if you will, and payments for their time of war. And at that point in time, they would send some of the money home. Well, in particular, in the area, like in I think it was Greensboro, South Carolina, it got to a point so bad that women were then able to take the money that they were received from their husbands who were away at war, and they were able to provide for their families with that. They're no longer requiring them to be doing their indentured servitudes to, you know, some white families. And that caused an uproar. A lot of people felt some type of way about it because now they would have to, attend to their own families, do certain things that they weren't accustomed to doing. And so, in particular, they made a law in Greensboro, South Carolina, which stated that Black women had to work, that they were required to work in that area. And I believe that was around the 1930s. If you guys give me, or excuse me, 1900s. If you give me 1 second, I'll be able to verify that. But I find that to be very interesting because we all know one thing about, being Black and coming up under some of the conditions that a lot of us grow up under. We're accustomed to making the most out of a little, pardon me. So as you all know, like how soul food has its origins as far as taking scraps from other meals and things of that nature and making it into a good meal. That's just how we've been used to. So
turning the bad into good.
Exactly. They say making lemonade out of lemons, things of that nature, being resourceful, if you will. So when the women were able to get those funds, they were like, oh, I don't need to work. I didn't even get this much money, you know what I'm saying, working. So now that my husband's able to sit in this home, we can take care of the house. We can do this. And another thing that also helped push for the women liberation thing as well, Sam, was when the men were away and the factory still needed to get things and they still needed to have stuff. A lot of women did go to work in those factories and did go to work inside of those companies. And then it was almost like, okay, the men came back from war. All right, y'all got to get out of here. We coming back to take our spots. And some of the women were like, no, like we like being able to,
right. And make money. Right.
Street and do our thing. Like,
right.
We move out the way. Like, if it wasn't for us, we wouldn't have finished the war. We had to go out here and play our part. So
right.
I think those are all factors that also contribute into, the moments that we're talking about as far as, women's liberation as well as civil rights as well. So I just want to add that little bit in there.
Yeah, one of the people I wanted to make sure I highlighted was Ida B. Wells, who was a part of both movements, essentially, right? She was about, women's liberation and Black people, Black women, and us getting the right to vote and us being able to do the things that we needed to do in order to flourish as a people. And so I just wanted to make sure I highlighted her as well, because she's definitely somebody that is noteworthy and absolutely deserves to be mentioned when you're talking about the evolution of Black women, because she definitely played a huge part in making sure we got some of the things that we have today, right? And so, but no, I agree with you, Everett, as it relates to that. But what I was saying to you, Malik, was I don't totally disagree with you, right? But I do think that, because I did say that too, like a lot of it rolled on the coattails of the civil rights movement. And women's lib rode on the coattails of the civil rights movement. And I think a lot of the advancements that women have been able to have throughout history comes from the civil rights movement. I mean, no matter how much people may not like saying that, it's the truth, right? Because if the goal is equality in the civil rights movement, and that's also the same goal in the women's liberation movement, and the civil rights movement started first and was getting way more traction, then of course you're going to ride that coattail, right?
Yeah. Hey guys, 1 second. I had that article up. I just want to just go ahead and reference this real fast to show everybody what was being said. So this is a post from the Greensville, South Carolina, a newspaper, which said Negro women will be put to work. A city ordinance soon to be passed, requiring them to be employed regularly, regardless of if they want to or have to. Able-bodied women, Negro women in Greenville who are not regularly employed are to be put to work in jail or heavily fined, and this is something that the city council looked to do due to a number of complaints coming from councils, from a member of councils of women who were not at work and refused employment that was offered to them. And the families who needed cooks, laundryans, and things of that nature. how in referencing here again, the wives of colored soldiers were getting monthly allowances from the governments, and that due to those people, due to women receiving these things, that they no longer felt the need to work. And it's almost, it almost kind of gives off that eerie vibe of when unemployment came about. If this time, if you could just reference it real quick off the tip, but when we had the PUA stipends and things of that, and we seen during the COVID times how some people who happened to be unemployed ended up making more money than they would have made if they were actually employed with their with their normal jobs, which requires some people to not feel the need to want to go back to work because it was like, hey, why would I go back to work in this job where I was making less money, where I can get more now, you know what I'm saying, due to with me not being employed. And and that's sad, but it also shows that that's how slow some people were being paid.
Or little, right.
So yeah, I just wanted to show that. I'm sorry, guys. We can go back to the.
Wait, Malik, Malik, you were getting ready to say something.
Shoot. I done lost my thought because I'm thinking.
Okay, it's all right.
Put to work now. I done lost my thought on it. I think I was going towards like, okay, it's always been a disguise, like, oh yeah, women's right and being independent woman, right? But was that something Black women originally wanted, or is that something that was marketed and
sorry? No, I think Black women wanted to be treated,
advertised towards them, right?
No, I think Black women wanted it, not necessarily just as being Black, but also being woman, right? If you're being oppressed on two spectrums, you're trying to get it how you get it, right? Because why would anybody want to be oppressed in any way, right? Or limited in any way. So I don't know if it's necessarily about being independent more than it is about having an equal playing field. You know what I mean? And I think that because even if, let's say, everything went the way that everybody had hoped, wished, or dreamed with the civil rights movement, right? Women still would have been oppressed if women's lib never happened. Black women would still be oppressed if women's lib had never happened, right? Because number one, we're already at the bottom of that totem pole. And on top of that, for women still would not have the rights that we have today. So it's kind of like a double entendre for the Black women. I don't think it was just hey, let me just ride the coattails. No, I believe that there's a lot of Black women in the forefront of both movements that were doing everything that they could so that Black women would not be forgotten. Because again, if we're at the bottom of the totem pole, it's easy to forget about us.
Well, I want to make a quick comment, even though it's kind of shifting. I'm kind of shifting towards modern women, modern day. I'm going to kind of take a shift because I'm thinking, when I think about it, women want independence, but they also want to be dependent upon someone else as well. Most women, not all. There's usually not a one size fits all, but there's exceptions. But when I think about it, they want independence, right? They want to independently do things. They want to have some sort of control, but they also want to have a partner. Most women, particularly a male.
It's independence in what though? They want financial independence, just like anybody else.
Well, yeah, they want control. But they also
financial, right? You want to be able to say, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is the job I have. This is the career I have. I'm able to make this amount of money."
Finish it up, Sam. Yeah. They want control, but they also want to be independent, like you were saying, like financial independence, be able to do what they want. But they also want to have that man or other person where they can depend on them financially, and they still have that stability. And their independence is just secondary to that, but they still want to have it. They don't want to choose either or, right? Most women want both. That's really what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but a lot of that comes from
the modern day
being able to be stable, right? If you have a man that's taking care of you, if something goes wrong, you want to be able to sustain the family. You don't want it to be like, oh my God, he lost his job. Now everybody's homeless. You want to be able to pick up that slack and help that man out, right? Or if you have somebody that's trying to control you, you want to be able to control your own narrative, right? You don't want somebody to be able to nickel and dime you and control you however they see fit. You want to be able to be the narrator of your own story. So it's not a matter of being not wanting to have stability, right? Or be dependent, because some women prefer to be completely dependent on a man. Some women don't. I think that's just to each his own. But I think what you're getting at, Malik, it really comes from what is the goal and what is it that you see or you've experienced or you are trying to prevent, right? Are you doing it so that your family is never going to have to struggle? Are you doing it so that, God forbid, something like as a safety net, right? Are you doing it to contribute, right? Because think about it. There are also plenty of men out there that would prefer for their woman to work because he wants to help. It's not necessarily, at that point, it's not about independence or dependence. It's about contribution.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
not what's best for the family. But
contribution.
what I'm getting at is something different. Like, let me give you a better example.
Wait, hold on. First, clarify what you're saying when you said it's not good for the family.
Like, no, I didn't say not good. I said that's like he's asking contribution because he needs help for like the best of the family. I'm talking about independence and control factor, as in like, finance is a way of a control mechanism. So women want to have decisions, but still be dependent upon a man. Like they still want to be independent in a way where, hey, they can do things on their own. They still have it's about control, really. That's really what I'm getting.
It's about financial control. Exactly. You want to be able to buy the things that you want to buy if somebody's not going to give them to you.
Right. And I was watching a video last night, real quick. I was watching a video and like this guy, he was interviewing 3 women and 3 walks of life, and a lot of women that they like, even if the man was paying all the bills and taking care of everything, they still wanted some sort of control. Like 2 of the 3 women still wanted control.
Right.
Like that's a small microcosm, like a sample size, but it's just, that seems to be a common thing. Like women still want some sort of control, some sort of say, even if the man is modern day women anyways, even if the man's still providing a certain lifestyle, still paying all the bills, still doing everything, they still want to have some sort of independent control.
Right. For the reasons that I said, either A, because they want a safety net, or B, because they don't want to have somebody else controlling what they have financially. If they want to go get something, they want to be able to go get it. So if somebody is not going to provide for them, they're able to provide for themselves. Like going out on a date, right? You go out on a date, especially if it's a first date, always bring money. I mean, you should never leave the house with no money anyway. You know what I'm saying? Because you never know what that other person is going to do, how they're going to respond. You got to be able to pay your own bill. It goes to the conversation that we had similarly when we were talking about how these women are getting flued out and then they're not giving it up. And then the man is like sending them back, but they going back, they ain't got no money. Like, don't leave the house with no money. You got to be.
That's a contradiction, Sam. Like, you can't be you're independent, but you're depending on another person or expect another person to pay.
No, I don't think it's a contradiction because I think you can be dependent. It's not, because you don't have to be 100% dependent on somebody. You don't. Like, you can depend on somebody without being 100% dependent. And having a safety net or having a way out of a situation, there's nothing wrong with that. Or being able to sustain yourself or sustain that other person. There's nothing wrong with that, because like I said, it could be for purposes of having a safety net or so that somebody cannot control you financially. Like if you are in a situation where you are 100% dependent on somebody and they're abusive in the way that they quote unquote take care of you, they give you nickel and dime you, like you might have needs and all that, and then like barely meeting those needs. It's not because they don't have it, but because they choose not to. Then you are you're subjecting yourself to a more frustrating situation. Whereas if you were in that type of a circumstance, you have the freedom to be able to remove yourself from it because you have a nest egg. You see what I'm saying? And so, no, I don't think it's contradictory at all, because you have to be able to sustain yourself and potentially sustain your family if things go wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Like you should be able to sustain yourself, but once you're getting elevated to the point of receiving and doing things that you can't do on your own, that's some sort of dependence.
Right. But you should still be able to have money for yourself. You see what I'm saying? And that's the reason why I say it's about financial control. You got to be able to take care of yourself. Right. If you're in a situation and he's like, look, she don't have to work. She don't have to do this. She don't have to do that. I'm going to take care of all of that. Great. But that don't mean she should not have no money. Right. Because if God forbid anything happened to that man, what is she going to do? You know what I'm saying? What is she going to do? Especially if they're not married. She's screwed because she don't get no benefit.
So I was gonna say, well, you should probably. That's exactly what I was gonna say. You should probably get married so you can have some benefits, right?
Yeah, but then what if he's not? What if he's abusive? You see what I'm saying? Like, it's always a what if. So it's better to just have that as a safety net and a nest egg to make sure. And God forbid anything happens to him financially. Let's say nothing happens to him physically. But something happens financially. What y'all gonna do? You know what I'm saying? But if you have that safety net, you're there to help him until he's able to get back on his feet. That's part of the part. That's
I
part
think that's a little bit of a catch-22, right? Because I think a lot of times what we'll hear is some women to be like, oh, well, I want to be able to have this education to a degree so I could help if things go wrong. But then what do you find? If you've been living in the world in which you haven't been working, you out of the workplace for a certain amount of time, it's very challenging for you to jump back into that workplace. If you don't have a skill set or maybe a profession that will allow you to just kind of, put yourself back into the game, if you will, or a high set of skill set that's in demand, it's not like you could kind of leave the game for a while and then just jump back in. You also hear a lot of women say, oh, I took some time off to raise my children, and then find that they're struggling to find, employment again, right. Following that time frame. So I think, even when we look at it from that standpoint, I understand what Malik's saying in a sense. It's almost like, well, hey, if you really want to say that that you're doing this to say like, oh, well, I could catch your back, like, it's almost like, and again, this is a little off topic, but it's almost like stay in the workplace so that you can stay building the foundation so that you guys can stay having something available so that there is no, if he falls off, now I got to just jump back in and try to save the day. Like it a lot of times it doesn't necessarily work that way. You know what I'm saying? It may be a situation where he fall off. Oh, well, to him, I'm going to go over here to my mama's house, or I might go to my dad's house, or she can go, or you know what I'm saying? Like until I can regroup and then I get my own stuff going and then whatever the case may be. But I think if it's a situation in which you guys are both contributing to that, to the well-being of your household or family, then even if something like, even with times kind of, shift, the family will still be able to stay stable because you guys have some things built up. You have a reserve built up on deck. You have some of the other things built up. And then also, you know what I'm saying? You're able to contribute. You're able to have some of the abilities to have your own money. And also to that point, I think as men, who will look to maybe take care of their woman, we have to understand that, again, you don't only want to provide them with just enough for the basics, essentials. You need to provide them with enough so that they can have that freedom to feel like, which is crazy to say, but have their own little money so that they can feel somewhat independent, so that maybe they don't have to come ask you for,
that right there is the very reason why I said that.
But I also think at the same time, you might be also, what's the term I'm trying to say? Like you might be, like giving that person the room that they need to leave. Like, so if a person is in this without the right intentions and you're giving them money and excess money, now they might feel like they could build up a big enough safety net to feel like, oh, if anything go wrong, I got my money. And then I don't like something that you do. I'm gonna leave off the money that you gave me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna go somewhere else because I think a better situation might be better for me. That's kind of bold because it's like, dang, you know what I'm saying? This person sat there, he gave willingly. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, you just, took all of the bread, and once you decided that you got enough, you gonna leave. And I mean, to some senses, it's like that's kind of on the man. But I also think because it's like you should have maybe vetted a little bit better to make sure that this woman wanted you for you and not wanted you because of what you were able to do for them. But at the same time, it's like, that was still a good-hearted person. That's still a good person who did what they did because they wanted to be with you, and a person takes advantage of them. So that's the game. So that's why I can understand people playing it on both sides. Dudes being like, no, if you want to have that independency, you need to be working so that you can have it. And then I understand it from the standpoint of people being like, hey, no, I'm going to just give you what we need. And then, you know what I'm saying? You might, whatever else that we can do, we either going to budget that in or whatever else,
But or she has to go make sure she has her own so that she's not getting nickels and dimes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If she's working,
right,
she has her own money, then that's a moot issue. You don't have to have that conversation. Y'all just deal with what y'all deal with together for the household, and she can do whatever she wants to do with her money. But so it goes that way. But also we wanted to highlight some of the advancements that women have made since being in the workplace in the modern day era and being able to accomplish some great tasks in particular. So, one of the things that we wanted to highlight as well is about education. I know recently, or there's been a statistic that was going around stating that, Black women in particular are some of the highest educated categories of individuals that they are, currently. In
the world.
So we have, more Black women attending schools and colleges and things of that nature, receiving higher education. Unfortunately, another statistic on that as well is that they're still one of the most underpaid as well in the industry. So that does suck because we do see an influx of women who are receiving educations, who are going to school, who are training. But at the same time, when they get into the workplace, they're realizing that they're not getting the same fair shake as either their white counterparts or, their male counterparts. So that does suck. But we have seen some women who have been able to rise above those things. And, I don't want to call them unicorns, but we definitely wanted to highlight a few of them. I know one of them or two of them in particular that we researched on our way here.
Hang on. Before you jump into that, can I say something about education? Before you get into where we are now, I want to say how we got here as it relates to education. So as we were talking earlier about like servitude and starting from slavery and getting into servitude, with the civil rights movement, one of the things that they worked on is integration. And forget about separate, but equal, just integration. And I think that Black women are probably the ones that benefit the most from that. And the reason why I say that is because upon getting better education, right, because it wasn't that Black folks weren't getting an education, we just didn't have the funding and appropriate resources to give a better education. And so once Black women started getting a better education, the goal was to continue to raise up your children in a way where they had more than you, right? And then, that's when you start talking about the talented 10th. Like the talented 10th is a phrase coined by W.E.B. Du Bois about Black folks going to college. 10% of Black people go to college. I don't think that statistic has changed very much. Maybe it's 12% now. They go to college. I don't know what the percentages of people that finish, right? Because a lot of people go to college, but most people don't finish. Well, I'm not going to say most, but a lot of people don't finish. And so when you talk about that and you talk about the evolution of that education, Black women have really been going hard, right? Not just going and getting a bachelor's degree. A lot of Black women have been going to get post-secondary degrees as well, whether it be a master's degree, a doctorate degree, whatever, right? They're going to get these post-secondary degrees. And I think that also has helped to contribute with the education of Black women. And even though Black women have evolved in corporate America, right, you see way more Black women in corporate America. Going to what E said, you don't see them getting paid as much. So I just wanted to make sure I touched on that first.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so one of the biggest things though, before I highlight some of these individuals, I definitely want to start with on a day-to-day and more of the masses. We currently see a lot of women who are starting boutiques, whether it's clothing lines, you know what I'm saying, hair and nails, salons, businesses. You also see women that's doing a lot of skincare. There's, so there's a lot of small business owners that's out here really killing the game with designs, whether it's clothing or as far as like hats, accessories, jewelry, all types of things that we see as well. But some of the more some of the more bigger names that we are used to seeing. I think one of the biggest ones that formerly that we were known was the former Secretary of State, which was Condoleezza Rice. And she served under the, I believe it was the Clinton administration. If I'm
Bush.
It was the Bush administration. Sorry, thank you. The Bush administration. We also have Rosalinda Brewer, who is the CEO of Walgreens Boot Alliance. That is a Fortune 500 company, and that is a Black woman who is at the head of that company. We also have Ursula Burns, who was one of the first Black women to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She served as the CEO of Exxon from 2009 through 2016, I believe. And then we also have currently Thursinda Brown Duckett, who serves currently as the CEO of TIAA, which is another Fortune 500 company. So and not to mention, you actually said you got Oprah Winfrey, who was known for being a billionaire as well. We got Rihanna. I don't know her whole name, but we got Rihanna.
Fenty. Let's get it right.
Yep, we got Miss Fenty, and
her name is Robin Fenty, aka Rihanna.
Robin Fenty.
I got you.
Thank you. We have Miss Robin Fenty, who is also a billionaire, Black lady, and self-made as well. So there has been women have made tremendous strides within those last, what we talking about, like 70 years or so, since we started to see civil rights and things of that nature come about. So I think it's imperative that we let women know that not only can women work in the workplace, but some women are able to do that and thrive. I don't necessarily feel like that we need to make that the necessarily goal for all young ladies to feel like, just like I don't think that this should be the goal for all young men, especially people of color in particular, because of how extremely challenging it may be for individuals to be able to get into those positions. But we do want to highlight the individuals who are able to do such, and again, continue to strive and let people know to go after whatever goals that you want to go after, but just understand that you don't necessarily have to reach those heights in order to be a success. That as long as you're able to provide a food on your table, a roof over your head, and have some of the luxuries that you would like to have in life, you are successful. So I just want to encourage any woman who may be out here who's maybe looking at some of these other women that we maybe mentioned, or other women that's out here in society that's winning, and thinking that they're not doing what they need to be doing, or not where they want to be at in life, or whatever, to understand that they can, one, continue to keep striving, and two, just understand that you are a success even in of itself if you're able to maintain yourself and maintain your household. So that's some little things that I want to talk about in the modern day, as well as give a little bit of some of my final thoughts on this subject.
Yeah. Some of my final thoughts are, Black women have made tremendous gains in the workforce. being executives of several companies, CEOs, starting their own businesses, one of which I'll be highlighting soon in the show. I think I think there's still some progress with the money gap because it says men and women are almost at even a dollar to a dollar. It's not quite there. I think it's like $1.98. However, I think that's white men to white women right now, white men to black women. So that's still below. And I think Sam and I we had discussed that. I think what black women is like what 64, 68 cents or 78
Yeah, something like that.
around there. It's one of our other episodes. Y'all can check that out. I forgot the name of it right now, but so we black women still need to make up that gap to get to that night around that 98 cents where white women are for that to even be equal amongst women, and they could still have even a little bit more gains to be equal amongst their male counterparts. So that's some of the issues and challenges that they face. But there's still hope that you know that black women will continue to progress because they are getting degreed up the most and educated. So maybe there'll be some results in the coming years out of that where a lot of new companies and startups are produced from black women that will employ black women and employ them and give them favorable wages, right? So that's some of the hopes. But I think that's something that can happen that can actually make an impact kind of immediately on black women's wages and that issue other outside of legislation and other legal ways, legislative tactics that can be used. So yeah, those are some of my final thoughts on the topic. Do you have anything, Sam, or you want me?
Yeah, I wanted to give my final thought. First of all, Black women, we are magic. And so I know that we always talk about Black girl magic, and some people don't necessarily care for the phrase, but I don't care. We are magic because we make things happen when nobody ever sees a way, right? It's something that we've been able to do throughout the history of the world, not just here in America, just period, right? That's just how we are. That's our quote unquote, that's our get down. You know what I mean? And so just keep pushing and keep striving and keep moving forward and keep the conversations going. And remember your value and demand it, right? Remember to get what you deserve. The reason why I say that is because a lot of times we get shortchanged. And as long as we continue to demand what we deserve, eventually people are going to start listening, right? I know sometimes things get tiresome being a Black woman and people not listening to you only to find out that you were right in the first place. Just keep at it though. We just got to continue to be resilient and diligent because like this whole episode has literally highlighted the evolution of women, mostly in the in the workplace, but you can kind of see our growth just in society, right? And how we continue to push forward and push through. And so I think that it's important that we just continue to do that, right? Because we've come a long way, even though there's a lot further to go.
Right. That's good. Good final thoughts there. I want to highlight first the Black business. Well, actually, first, before the Black business, the book of the month. I don't have it with me, but it's called 10X by Grant Cardone. It's about enhancing your life, how to produce results 10 times, especially financially. I think that would be a good book for not just Black women to read, but everybody. But since we're talking about Black women too, the 10X results, which I think they could use, well, everybody will want to utilize. So that's a good book. It's a book that I'm currently reading. So it's 10X by Grant Cardone. And then after the book of the month, I want to highlight the Black business of the month. Like I spoke about a little earlier, it's called the Black Sister Shop. It's a Black-owned business, Black women-owned business, by the way, and they sell products from various vendors, lotions, creams, clothing, all kinds of stuff you can get there, based out of Atlantic Station, out in Atlanta, Georgia, and also they have a location in New Jersey, Elizabeth, New Jersey as well. So once again, the Black Sister Shop, and you should see that on your screen. Also, the motivational minute I want to get to is a pretty interesting one. I think so. This is the motivational minute. I have a quote here. There can be no happiness if the things we believe in are different from the things we do. So this is by Freya Stark, and basically a quote is basically saying, hey, you can't be happy if what you're believing in is different from what you're doing. And if you're trying to achieve your goals and dreams, you want to be consistent and actually do that and not just say that and be about it. So that's why I thought it was a good quote for today. I think it speaks to the tremendous strength, right, that Black women have endured over these years from being caretakers to dealing with slavery, of course, and to advancing in the education, civil rights, going to work, dealing with Jim Crow, dealing with redlining, dealing with all the issues that they had to deal with, and still found a way to be some of the most educated people in the country, actually being the educated people in the country, right? And developing new inventions like Madam C.J. Walker did, being CEOs of big corporations and executives of big companies. So they made great efforts. So with all that being said, that's my motivational minute. And that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you for joining us. We'll be posting this every Saturday around 1:30. You should check us out. If you guys want us to talk about different topics, shoot us a DM. You can shoot us an email at counterpointspod@gmail.com, or you could shoot us an Instagram DM as well. However you need to contact us, we'll get back to you and give you a response. So remember, like, share, and subscribe, tell your friends, tell friends, and I'll let my co-hosts say anything else they want to say, their closing remarks.
Yep, that you pretty much just got it. Our social medias are going to be posted right here at the end, so make sure you go ahead and follow us. And that's about it. Oh, What's Up Wednesday, 8:30, Instagram every Wednesday. So other than that, we will see you later. Have a good one. Peace.
Yeah, peace, guys.